Hello darts fans! It's Timo Newman here, the transporter. Welcome to the good ship Undarted Waters. Here we are on this wonderful voyage, all about is darts biased against left-handed players. I'm a left-handed player. I've got some opinions on this, but I'm trying to make this a scientific inquiry, not just me standing on my box, what do they call it, thumping my tub. Not doing that, okay? So just a little Shanghai on the 16s there, and that's going to be very relevant to later on in the video. So without further ado, this is video 3. This is all about, is there bias coming from the environment of darts or the equipment? So let me get my whiteboard and let's get cracking. I'm very excited about today's video because I feel like this series is kind of like a scientific, what we used to do like research proposals when we tried to get money from the government, namely from taxpayers, to fund science. It's very hard to do actually. The government doesn't give that out easily, but you have to kind of like make your case, show that there's a question to answer, show what the controls are, and then give your research ideas, your hypotheses, and at the end, maybe when you've done all the research, you can give some conclusions. And this series is kind of like this. In video 1, we wanted to kind of indicate, is there even an issue here? Is darts statistically biased against left-handed players? And we showed very convincingly, I think, that it is. I won't go over all that again. If you're interested and you haven't seen that first video, you can find it on the channel there. But essentially, the chance of darts not being biased based on the results at the elite level was around 4%. So there's like a 96% chance there is a bias. Okay. Now, video 2 yesterday was, are there human factors for this? Is there something intrinsic? So this is not about a human interacting with a dartboard, but just is there something intrinsic to humans as organisms that means that they essentially can't play darts that well? And we looked at some of the biology of humans relating to this. We talked about symmetry breaking in nature, symmetry breaking in humans at all different levels of our bodies. But we then looked at other sports, and we found that in combat sports, left-handers are overrepresented because they have that training and experience advantage of competing more often against right-handed opponents. And then the coup de grace really was looking at snooker, which is not a combat sport, of course, neither is darts, in terms of people facing each other in real time. And we saw that in snooker, where there's a very symmetrical setup of the game, apart from the yellow and green balls, of course, but they're, I think, pretty irrelevant because they're so low scoring. But essentially, snooker being very symmetrical, we found that there were, out of 30 different people who've been world champion, 3 of them are left-handers, okay? And the first of those, of course, having a surname starting with W, but that's another story. But there were 3, so 1 in 10. And even though this is small number statistics, so it's not rigorous, but it was very satisfying to see that in snooker, the success of left-handers at the elite level was very representative of left-handers in the general population. 10% of people generally are left-handed. Whereas, just to remind you, in darts, at the elite world championship level, not including BDO after the split, but there's never been a left-handed world champion. There's never even been a left-handed runner-up. Wow. Okay. So today, though, I think is where we get into the meat, because my gut feeling all along as a left-handed darts player and a left-handed darts fan is that it's not really about the humans, it's about what the humans are interacting with. And they're interacting with 2 different things essentially. One is their environment and the other is with the equipment. So we're going to look at environment and then we're going to look at equipment. And the question we're going to keep asking ourselves is there a symmetry broken in the environment and or the equipment that either favors or disfavors left-handers? Okay, so without any more ado, let's get rid of this recap on here and get cracking, and we're going to start with the environment. But the key thing to remember here is that we're not looking for massive effects. I mean, if the environment was something like, oh, didn't you know, Timo, that when left-handers go up to the oki, the ref blows a loud whistle or releases a hungry tiger onto the stage, and then when the right-hander comes, they don't blow the whistle and they remove the tiger. No, we're not looking for those kind of 100% effects, okay, that would be clear bias. We're looking for small things, because there are left-handed dart players at the elite level, of course. There's James Wade. We also mentioned 3 others, Mickey Mansell, Neil Zonnefeld, and Ryan Meikle, who are in the world top 64. And there'll be others, of course, historically, Mark Webster and Les Wallace and many others. So there are left-handed darts players at the elite level, but they're not at the very top, and that's the question. They're underrepresented at the very top. And so we're looking for small effects, and if we can find, say, a 1% effect here, a 1% effect there, a 1% effect there, they will add up maybe to a 5% net effect, which would be more than enough to explain this underrepresentation of left-handed players. And to give you the heads up for this video, I think that I can show you at least today 5 different deleterious breakings of symmetry that disfavor the left-handed player. Okay. And you may agree or disagree with these, but that's what this channel is all about, for discussion. So please leave your comments below the video. Right, so we're going to talk about environment first. So environment, and by this I don't mean the equipment, so I'm not going to include the dart or the board, but it's really the setting in which the dart player finds themselves, okay? So dare I try and draw a picture here? Well, tell you what, let's say we were looking from above. Let's do a bird's eye view. So here's the oki. Here's our dart player. Okay, and let's say it's a left-hander. So we've got their dart there. And then here's the board. And here's the referee. Everyone seems to be quite bald. I apologize for that. So R for referee, P for player. You might also have scorers as well. So scorer 1 and scorer 2 maybe. Now in the professional, elite level also, there might be a camera hanging around, which tends to be from this angle. Okay. So, and then you've got the actual oki itself. Right, so that's a left-handed player, so they're standing like this, okay, so they're naturally somewhat facing the referee. So I think this is our first bias here, is that if the referee is not absolutely still and is maintaining complete lack of expression, so being a statue, unless they're doing that, there's probably going to be more visual distraction for a left-handed player than for a right-handed player. So let's say, for example, a left-handed player hits a treble 1 and then another treble 1. A referee might smirk, or they might shift uncomfortably. All of that's going to be more visible to the left-handed player compared to the right-handed player. Okay, so I think this is our first, I'm going to put 1 here, this is our first potential bias, is that the referee is more in the line of sight, more in the eye line of the left-handed player. So that's an environmental bias, a symmetry breaking. It's definitely a symmetry breaking. You might argue it actually favors left-handed players, because in their unconscious, if they regard the referee as a threat who might suddenly pounce on them with a knife, it's better to be facing them having them slightly behind you. So in the unconscious, maybe it favors left-handers, but I think that's a bit far-fetched. I think more is the eye line and the distraction. Potentially the camera, although, I've never been in that setting, I don't know anything about that, so maybe for folks who've been in that setting, they can comment whether the camera, where it is, and if it moves around, if that's more of an issue. You might think that was actually more of an issue for the right-handed player, actually. I don't know. Interesting, that one. So let's put a question mark there. I don't know about the camera. But here's actually kind of the big one for me. It's going to sound a bit silly at first, but I think as a left-handed player, this is actually quite a big deal. And this is something that I think we could look at in the next video, which is about remedies. Okay. This player throws their darts. 1, 2, 3. They got 26. That would be me playing, okay? And then they walk up to the oche. They collect their darts, and they have to walk back this way to return to their place. So you have to return on the right-hand side of the oche, or the right-hand side of this sort of channel where we throw the darts. Okay. Now, for a right-handed player, you may never have thought about this, but for left-handed players, this is very awkward. Okay. So let me put this away and just show you what I mean. So I got my 26, didn't I? So there's my 26. Now a right-handed player typically will collect their darts with their other hand. So they'll walk along, scoop up the darts, and turn and be on their way, okay? It's all a sweeping, continuous movement. You walk up, you collect the darts, you turn, and you walk back. But for the left-handed player, generally, you have your throwing hand and your helping hand. You don't generally pick up your darts out of the board with your throwing hand. So the helping hand for a left-hander is the right hand. You pick your darts up with the right hand, and you want to go this way. You want to go this way because you're facing that way. You're ready to move, but no, you've got to turn and walk. So the right-hander, let's put the board back. So the right-handed player is sort of like walking along and has a nice smooth turn like this, whereas the left-handed player has to do a little dance in the middle. The left-handed player comes up and they have to do this. They do a little turn, basically, which is quite annoying, actually, and quite uncomfortable. It's so much more natural to come back the other way. Now, you might say, well, that's not a very big deal. Well, I think it is, because another reason is that when you are practicing at home, you're not going to do this every time as a left-handed player. You're not going to do that little jig every time. You know, if you throw thousands of times at the board in a day's practice, you're not going to do that little jig every time. So you're probably, left-handed players are probably going to go this way. So in practice, the left-hander will be doing this to return for their next throw thousands and thousands of times. So in their mental state of throwing, collecting darts, and for the next throw, they're going the other way. But then when they're in tournaments, they have to go the right hand, basically the right-hander's way. Okay, and you know, I've practiced not doing that. So if I'm playing 501 against Ernie Flapp, who's my imaginary opponent here, I'll have to introduce you to Ernie one day, but Ernie Flapp's my imaginary opponent. But if I'm playing 501, I give him a turn to play. I return this way and do my little dance to get practice for that, okay? So this is a big deal. Now I've checked these elite left-handed players in the PDC. Ryan Meikle, yes, he collects his darts with his helping hand, his right hand, and does the turn. Neil Zonnefeld, he collects the darts with his helping hand, his right hand, and does the little turn. Same for Mickey Mansell. But guess what? Guess what? Does James Wade pick up his darts with his helping hand? No. Wow. Major point here. James Wade, who's probably the most successful left-handed darts player in modern times. I say modern, I mean really since the game's been televised. James Wade picks up his darts with his throwing hand so that he doesn't have to do the jig. He pretends to be a right-handed dart player when he collects his darts. Wow, this is massive. So I think this jig is our second smoking gun of bias. But James Wade has hacked that. He says, you know what? I'm going to pay the price of collecting my darts with my throwing hand, which is not a good thing to do because you might injure your hand, you might scrape it on the dartboard. Doesn't feel right, you want to rest that arm. This is why we collect the darts with the other hand. But he doesn't. He falls on his sword, he picks up his darts with his throwing hand, but that allows him to not have to do the jig and to pretend to be a right-hander in his return. So from the environment then, some really interesting things here, but I think there are two clear issues for left-handed players: the position of the ref and also this, I think, somewhat arbitrary rule that you have to return along the right-hand side, which really is a problem, I think, for left-handers for the reasons that I've given. Now, that's all fantastic. What about the equipment? Well, one thing I love about darts is that there isn't much equipment, because I'm a very frugal person. I would not be laying out a lot of money to play a sport. So what I love about darts is you can lay out, say, £40 for a nice set of tungsten darts, another £40 for a nice board, and you're on your way, right? So equipment. Well, the first thing is the dart itself. And what's nice about the dart is this dart does not care if you're left-handed or right-handed. You know, it's just what we have in physics is a term, we call it cylindrical symmetry. A dart has cylindrical symmetry. Particularly if I take the flight off, that object has cylindrical symmetry. Okay, it doesn't matter which way I turn it along its axis, it just looks the same. So this doesn't care about left or right-handers. So that's fine. So the dart, we can give a big tick to. There's no bias there. So that leaves the board. Okay, the board. Question mark. Is there intrinsic bias in the board? Well, you could argue probably the most important parts of the board in the elite level would be the 20 segment and maybe the bull. Okay. They are both on the midline. So they're fine. They're on the midline, doesn't favor left or right. So then, Timo Newman, what are you thinking? Eh? Is there a problem? Well, it might be better if I just indicate on this whiteboard where I think the issues are and then show you on the actual dartboard, okay? So what do I think the issues are? What the issues are with the dartboard? Well, I think there are essentially three, and in order of importance, the most important one, so let me call this actually like, because I said that in the environment there were two issues, so issue 3, issue 4 and issue 5, and you might think that 4 and 5 are really minor, and they probably are, but I'm going to mention them anyway. But this is the big one, is the outshot, the doubling route. And I think you'll all know what I'm saying there, right? You all know what I'm saying there. The next one is actually to do with cover shot, which is the 19 segment, which is on this side of the board. It's on for the left hand, well, it's on the left hand side of the board. Well, I'm going to argue that that's the unnatural side, okay? And I'll explain that in a second. So the fact that the cover shot is a very important segment, the 19, and it's on one particular side of the board, I think is an issue. And then the other one is that the lowest scoring segments are on the right-hand side of the board, which is the most natural side, I think, for left-handers. So segment 1, segment 2, and segment 4, which are the lowest scoring segments, which are not on the midline, because the 3 is on the midline, these are all on the right-hand side. Okay, and the 19 segments on the left-hand side. So basically what I'm going to argue in a minute, I'll get rid of the whiteboard and show you on the board, but I'm going to argue that for a left-handed player, the right-hand side of the board is a more natural side compared to the left-hand side, and for a right-handed player, the left-hand side of the board is slightly more natural than the right-hand side. But we're not talking massive effects. So remember, we're only looking for like 1% effects, but if they add up, like I've identified at least 3, maybe 4 or 5 1% effects. If they add up 4 or 5% bias against left-handers in the environment and equipment, is more than enough to push people out of the very, very top of the sport. Okay, so let me try to maybe use this board to kind of indicate what I mean here. So when I throw as a left-hander, if I'm aiming for the midline, that's the easiest. So let's say that you're the 20. If I'm aiming for the midline, that's very straightforward. If I want to go as a left-hander for, say, double 10 as an outshot, and I want to keep my action the same, I don't want to piddle around with my action, so I just want to basically use my elbow joint and my forearm in a slightly different plane, that's very comfortable. Okay, and this is called a medial, roughly speaking, in anatomy terms, it's like a medial term, a medial motion, because it's towards the center of my body. So I'm going from this to this. But if I want to go for, say, double 8 and double 16, I have to do something called lateral and move, and I can't do that. My elbow will not allow me to do that. I've got to actually turn my body slightly or move my arms slightly. I have to move something to comfortably change that plane. Okay, so this is why I think that for a left-hander, the right-hand side of the board, you could call it for them the medial side is slightly more natural. The other side, the lateral side, is slightly awkward. And for a right-hander, the left-hand side of the board is their medial side, their slightly more comfortable side, and the right-hand side would be their lateral side, which would be slightly less comfortable. Not talking massive thing here. It's not like a 20% effect. Maybe it's a 1 or 2% effect, but that's enough, you see, to cause this accumulation of bias. So the fact that basically the best doubling route is double 16, double 8. They're right next to each other, and they're on, for the right-hander, the more comfortable side of the board, is a really big deal. I think this is one of the biggest issues, actually. Whereas for the left-hander, if you find this slightly awkward, you may end up going for tops and then with a backup of double 10, which is what James Wade is famous for doing. But the problem with that is you're having to move right across the board to go from one to the next if you miss the tops. And if you miss your double 10, you've got a wretched double because you can't go inside. Whereas, of course, what's famous about this route is 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. You've got many bites of the cherry if you go inside. So I think this doubling route thing is a very major disadvantage for left-handed players because of this anatomy of the elbow. If you could move your elbow the same in the lateral and medial directions, this actually would not be such a big deal. But because you can't do that, I think this is maybe a very significant problem. Okay. The other thing I mentioned was that the 19 for the right-hander is on their medial side of the board. This is a very, very small effect, but I just mention it because the cover shot to 19 is a very important shot. There may be a tiny little bias there against left-handers because, again, it's a very slight lateral shot for them. And then, really, the fact that 1, 2, and 4 are on what's the more comfortable side of the board for left-handers may just mean if they're spending more time on that side of the board, if they're not playing well, they've got much more chance of deep water. Whereas for the right-hander, their more comfortable side is packed with nice, like if they make mistakes, you know, those numbers are actually much more friendly, at least in terms of scoring. Okay, so let's bring the whiteboard back and let me wrap this video up. And by the way, I am aware that possibly one of the greatest players of all time who is currently doing their thing in front of us, Luke Littler, is famous for favouring double 10. So I accept that. So he's a right-handed player who loves double 10, and there are such folks, okay. But I think we could all agree that most players favour the double 16, double 8 because of the fact that you have more safety with that route. and my argument is that that's a more comfortable area of the board for right-handers. And James Wade has hacked that, and he just said, I don't like it because it's a lateral movement. I'm just going to do 20-10 and get really, really bloody good at it. So I think we start to appreciate when we see the symmetry breaking how much James Wade has had to kind of innovate the game in order to even be in the conversation at the very top of the sport. He's had to not have a helping hand. He might as well have that hand tied behind his back. He doesn't have a helping hand for collecting darts in order to avoid the jig on the way back. And he also has just trained himself. He's not called the machine for nothing, is he? He's trained himself to rigorously succeed at the double 20, double 10 switch. So with that then, thank you for your attention. This poor dart is like a bird with a broken wing, but never mind. 3 darts at the Oki, everyone. Thank you for all your support. I hope you found this video interesting, and tomorrow we're going to talk about remedies. If there's all this problem with left-handers, what are we going to do about it? Until then, all the best.